My ex tried to scam me for child support. Then my sister declared war on me for demanding a DNA test that proved I wasn't the father. The original poster OP begins by saying that a few months ago, he received a message from his ex. It was strange because they hadn't spoken in years, not since they broke up 5 years ago. He remembers staring at his phone, wondering if he should even reply. She didn't say much in the text, just that she wanted to talk. Part of him thought maybe she missed him or wanted to catch up, but that wasn't really her style. Still, he figured it couldn't hurt to hear her out, so he agreed to meet up. When she showed up, she wasn't alone. There was a little boy with her, who looked about 5 years old, give or take. She introduced him as his son. Yes, just like that. No build-up, no easing into it, just, this is your son. He couldn't even explain the shock he felt. He stared at her, then at the kid, and then back at her, trying to process what she had just said. The math kind of worked out. It had been 5 years since they last talked, so he supposed it was possible, but at the same time it didn't feel right. They weren't exactly serious when they dated. She had been pretty on and off with him and a few other guys. He's not judging, people date around. But the point is, there was no way he could just take her word for it. So he told her, as calmly as he could, that he'd need a DNA test before anything else. She didn't take it well. Her face immediately twisted, as if he had just insulted her. She started going on about how he should just trust her, and how she wouldn't lie about something like this. Honestly, he wasn't trying to accuse her of lying, but let's be real, this is a huge deal. If the kid was his, he'd want to know for sure before jumping into anything. He even told her he'd take full responsibility if the test came back positive. He said he'd cover all the costs, be in his life, and do whatever it took to step up as a dad. That didn't seem to matter to her. She was completely fixated on the fact that he didn't just take her word for it. She started listing all these reasons why a DNA test wasn't necessary. First, she said it was too expensive, which didn't even make sense because he offered to pay for it. Then she said it would be traumatizing for the kid. He thought, he wouldn't even know, it's just a cheek swab. It was excuse after excuse, and none of it added up. When he didn't budge, she switched tactics. She called him a deadbeat and accused him of trying to dodge his responsibility. She even dragged his family into it, calling his parents and telling them he was refusing to support his own child. That part really pissed him off because now his mom was blowing up his phone, demanding answers. He tried to explain everything to her, but she wasn't exactly neutral. She kept saying things like, if there's even a chance he's yours, you need to step up. Eventually, he put his foot down. He told his ex they weren't going any further until the DNA test was done, period. She acted like he was the worst person in the world, but he stood his ground. A week later, they finally did the test. He couldn't lie. He was nervous waiting for the results. What if he was wrong? What if this kid really was his? He started thinking about how his life would change. Would he have to co-parent with her? How would he explain this to future girlfriends? It was overwhelming. But when the results came back, he couldn't believe it. He wasn't the father. He felt a weird mix of relief and anger. Relief because he wasn't ready to be a dad, especially not in this way, but anger because she'd put him through so much stress for nothing. He called her as soon as he got the news, thinking she'd just accept it and move on. Instead, she flipped out again. She started crying, saying it wasn't fair and that he owed her money anyway for all the years she'd spent raising the kid. He told her straight up, I don't owe you anything. Then he hung up and blocked her number. He was done. After everything with his ex, he thought the drama was over. The DNA test came back negative, so that should have been the end of it, right? Wrong. Somehow his family managed to make things worse. A couple of weeks after the whole ordeal, his parents decided to have a small family gathering. Nothing fancy, just a casual get-together at their house. He wasn't thrilled about going because he knew his mom would probably bring up the situation with his ex. She'd been on his case about it ever since his ex called her. But he figured it was better to show up and deal with it, than to skip and hear about it later. The evening started out fine. His brother and he were hanging out in the living room, just catching up. At one point his brother brought up the situation with his ex. He started cracking jokes about it, which, honestly, made him laugh. He knows it might sound bad, but after all the stress she put him through, he felt like he deserved a moment to laugh about how ridiculous the whole thing was. His brother was on fire, coming up with jokes like, man, she really thought she could pull a Maury move on you. They were both dying, and even one of his friends who was there joined in. Then, out of nowhere, his sister stormed into the room. She looked absolutely furious. Before he could even say anything, she got in his face and started yelling, "Are you seriously sitting here joking about this?" She snapped, "You're mocking a poor woman who's been struggling to raise a child on her own. Do you even realize how cruel that is?" He was so caught off guard that he didn't even know how to respond. His brother tried to step in, saying it was just a joke, but that only made her angrier. She turned on him too, calling him immature and insensitive. At one point she actually pushed him against the wall. It wasn't hard or anything, but still, it was enough to make everyone in the room stop and stare. His friend looked like he wanted to intervene, but he shook his head, signaling him to stay out of it. After her little outburst, she stormed out of the room, leaving everyone awkwardly quiet. His dad eventually tried to break the tension by changing the subject, but the vibe was ruined. He stayed quiet for the rest of the night, not wanting to stir up more drama. Later, when the party was winding down, his sister cornered him in the kitchen. She'd apparently dragged his parents in there too because they were both standing behind her like backup. He could tell this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. She crossed her arms and started going off about what a jerk he was for putting his ex through a DNA test. According to her, he oppressed his ex by making her prove herself. She actually said he was contributing to the systemic mistrust of women. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You forced her to be a single mom," she said, glaring at him like he'd committed some kind of crime. "You have a moral obligation to help her, whether the kid is yours or not." At that point, he lost his patience. "Are you even listening to yourself?" he shot back. "She lied about me being the father. Why should I take responsibility for a kid that's not mine?" His sister didn't back down. She claimed he probably tampered with the DNA results, because men can do whatever they want. She also said the whole idea of a test was dehumanizing to his ex. His parents, who had been mostly quiet until now, finally chimed in. His dad said he didn't agree with his sister, but did think the jokes earlier were a bit cruel. His mom, on the other hand, was more on his sister's side. She said something about how women don't usually lie about these things, and maybe he should have been more understanding. His brother, bless him, jumped in to defend him. "Mom, are you serious? She tried to scam him for child support." That's not exactly understanding material. The argument went back and forth for what felt like forever. His dad eventually shut it down, saying, "Look, the jokes were in bad taste, but you're not responsible for that kid. Let's just leave it at that." But his sister wasn't done. She pointed her finger at him and said, "I'm not talking to you again until you take responsibility for what you've done." "What I've done?" he asked, genuinely confused. "What about what she's done? She lied, harassed me, and tried to ruin my reputation." "That doesn't matter," she shouted. "A woman's word should come first." At that point he realized there was no reasoning with her. She'd already made up her mind that he was the bad guy. He walked out of the kitchen, not bothering to argue anymore. His brother followed him, muttering something about how she'd lost her mind. He tried to put the family drama behind him, but his sister wasn't letting it go. She was dead serious when she said she wasn't talking to him until he took responsibility. At first, he thought she just needed time to cool off and see reason, but nope, she doubled down. She completely cut him off, unfollowed him on social media, and even stopped showing up at family dinners if she knew he'd be there. Honestly, he was fine with the silent treatment. It was better than arguing. But then things escalated. One day, he was at work, just going through his usual routine, when his phone started blowing up. First it was texts from CO workers, then calls from his boss. Apparently his sister and his ex had shown up outside his office with a giant handmade sign that had his face on it. The sign said, "Deadbeat dad, abandoned his child." They were parading it around for everyone to see, yelling about how he was a horrible person who refused to support his son. He can't even describe how humiliating that was. His CO workers were staring out the windows, taking pictures and whispering to each other. His boss called him into his office and asked what the hell was going on. He tried to explain the situation, but he could tell his boss wasn't happy. He told him point blank, "I don't care what your personal drama is, but if this happens again, you're out. We can't have this kind of distraction here." When he left the office, he was furious. He went outside and confronted them. His ex started crying, saying he'd ruined her life, and his sister just stood there with her arms crossed, glaring at him like he was the scum of the earth. He told them both to leave, or he'd call the cops. His sister had the audacity to laugh and say, "Go ahead, show everyone how you silence women." At that point, he was done trying to reason with them. He went back inside, grabbed his phone and called his lawyer. He explained everything, how they'd been harassing him, showing up at his workplace, and spreading lies. His lawyer told him they had more than enough to file a cease and desist order, and if they kept it up, they could take it further. When his sister found out he was getting a lawyer involved, she lost it. She posted a long rant on social media about how he was trying to weaponize the legal system against a single mom and his own family. She said he was proving how entitled men are by refusing to take responsibility. His ex jumped on the bandwagon, posting about how he was ruining her and her son's lives. She claimed she just wanted what was fair, and that he was using his privilege to escape accountability. The worst part? Some people actually believed them. He started getting messages from random strangers calling him a monster and telling him to do the right thing. A few extended family members even reached out, saying things like, "Are you sure the DNA test was accurate? Or maybe you should help her out just to keep the peace." The only people solidly on his side were his dad and his brother. His mom was trying to stay neutral but kept saying things like, "Maybe there's a way to work this out without all the fighting." His dad, on the other hand, was pissed. He told his sister she was being ridiculous and that she needed to back off, but of course, she didn't listen. About a week later, he woke up to find his ex and sister had taken things to the next level. They'd made a public post on a community Facebook page, complete with pictures of him and the sign they'd made. The post was basically a full-blown attack, accusing him of being a deadbeat dad and saying he was hiding behind lawyers to avoid supporting his child. It got a ton of comments, most of them from people who didn't even know him, saying things like, "What a loser," and "How can people like this live with themselves?" At this point, his lawyer told him they needed to take immediate action. He drafted a legal letter for both of them, outlining all the ways they were harassing and defaming him. The letter made it clear that if they didn't stop, they'd take them to court. When his ex got the letter, she freaked out. She called him, crying and begging him to drop it. She said she'd take back everything she posted and promised to leave him alone if he didn't follow through. She even tried to guilt him, saying he was ruining her and her son's lives. But he'd had enough. He told her, "You had your chance to stop this. You didn't take it." As for his sister, she was just as stubborn as ever. She called the letter a bluff and posted about it on social media, claiming he was trying to silence women. She said the legal system was rigged in favor of men, and that he was using it to punish her for standing up for what she believed in. She even posted screenshots of the letter, trying to rally support from her followers. His lawyer and he took screenshots of every single post she made. It was all evidence, and she was handing it to them on a silver platter. Eventually, the community page moderators took down his ex's post after he sent them proof that her claims were false. That was a small win, but the damage was already done. He still had co-workers giving him side-eye and extended family questioning his character. But at least the tide was starting to turn. People were beginning to see that his ex and sister were going way too far. Meanwhile, his sister started realizing she was losing support. A few of her friends told her to back off, and some of their relatives called her out for taking things too far. But instead of stopping, she doubled down. She kept posting, kept making a scene, and kept dragging his name through the mud. At this point, he knew it was only a matter of time before everything blew up in her face. After sending out the cease and desist letters, he thought things might finally calm down. Who would keep pushing after getting legal papers? Turns out, his sister and ex would. Instead of backing off, they ramped things up, mainly on social media. It was like they saw the legal notice as a challenge instead of a warning. His sister went on her platforms, ranting about how he was trying to silence her for standing up for a single mom who was abandoned by a deadbeat dad. She made it seem like this was some David versus Goliath situation, where he was the big bad guy abusing his power. His ex, not to be outdone, started posting about her poor son being abandoned and how she was just fighting to give him a better life. She talked about how he was weaponizing the legal system against her, claiming he was ruining her child's future by refusing to help financially. Of course, she left out the part where the DNA test proved the kid wasn't his. It wasn't just their posts that made things bad. They encouraged their followers to harass him too. He started getting DMs from random strangers calling him a loser, a coward, and worse. People were commenting on his profile pictures with things like "deadbeat" and "take care of your kid, jerk." At one point, someone even tried to review bomb the company he worked for, claiming they employed a known abuser. The thing is, he wasn't just dealing with the public drama. Behind the scenes, his family was still divided. His dad and brother had his back 100%. His dad even threatened to cut off his sister financially if she didn't stop. His brother, meanwhile, made it his mission to troll her posts, calling her out for her lies. But his mom was more complicated. She kept trying to mediate, saying stuff like, "Can't we all just sit down and work this out? Or maybe, if you just apologized, this would blow over." He had to remind her that he had nothing to apologize for. His ex lied, and his sister chose to side with her despite all the proof. As the weeks went on, his lawyer and he collected every single post, comment, and message they made about him. It was honestly like they were trying to build his case for him. His ex was especially reckless. She'd make claims like, "He admitted to me in private that he's the dad but refuses to help." Total lies. She even posted a picture of the DNA test results, claiming they were fake. His sister, meanwhile, was spouting nonsense about how he was a textbook example of male privilege. At first he thought all this social media nonsense was just annoying, but his lawyer pointed out how useful it was. Every post they made became another piece of evidence they could use against them. The more they talked, the worse it got for them. What really pushed things over the edge was when his ex tried to get her story picked up by a local news site. She pitched it as a single mom's fight for justice kind of thing. But the reporter actually did their homework. When they contacted him for a statement, he sent them all the documentation, the DNA test results, screenshots of his ex admitting she lied, and the harassment he'd faced. Needless to say, the story never got published. That didn't stop his ex and sister from spiraling, though. His sister made a follow-up post, accusing him of using his connections to shut down the article. She called him a misogynistic control freak who couldn't handle being held accountable. At this point, it was almost laughable how far they were reaching, but it still sucked to see his name dragged through the mud. Things took a sharp turn when his ex tried to organize a public protest. Yep, you read that right. A protest. She posted on social media calling for people to show up outside his workplace with signs to raise awareness about what a horrible person he was. He guesses she expected a big crowd, but only 3 people showed up. Her, his sister, and some random guy holding a sign that said, "Deadbeat dads deserve jail." The whole thing was pathetic, but it was also the final straw for his boss. His boss called him into his office again and told him flat out, "If this happens one more time, you're fired. I don't care who's right or wrong, I just can't have this disrupting the office." After that, his lawyer said it was time to escalate things. He filed the harassment lawsuit they'd been preparing. The suit included everything: defamation, workplace harassment, emotional distress, you name it. It wasn't just about the social media posts anymore. It was about how far they'd gone to ruin his life. When his ex found out about the lawsuit, she panicked. She called him, crying and begging him to drop it. She said she'd delete all her posts, stop contacting him, and take back everything if he'd just leave her alone. But he was done being the nice guy. He told her, "You had every chance to stop this. Now you'll have to deal with the consequences." His sister, on the other hand, didn't back down right away. She kept posting, insisting that he was bluffing and that he'd never actually go through with a lawsuit. She even mocked him in one of her posts, saying, "What's he going to do, sue his own sister?" Typical fragile male ego. But as the court date got closer, her confidence started to crack. Their extended family was getting involved now, and most of them were on his side. Even people who'd initially stayed neutral started calling her out, asking why she was going so far for a lie. His mom tried to talk to her, begging her to stop before it ruined her reputation, but his sister just accused her of enabling the patriarchy. Yeah, it was that bad. By the time the court hearing was set, his ex realized she didn't have a leg to stand on. She agreed to settle out of court, offering to pay damages in exchange for dropping the case. His sister, though, was left out in the cold. She had no legal grounds to stand on, and no one to back her up anymore. She'd gone all in on this crusade, and now she was facing the consequences. By the time everything came to a head, his ex had accepted reality. She caved and agreed to settle out of court, offering to pay for the damages she'd caused as long as he didn't push for harsher consequences. Honestly, he didn't care what she offered at that point. He just wanted her out of his life. She signed an agreement promising to delete every post, never contact him again, and cover the legal costs for the trouble she caused. The damage she did to his reputation at work and online was something he'd have to deal with, but at least she was out of the picture for good. That left his sister. She refused to back down, even after his ex bailed. In her mind, she was standing on some sort of moral high ground. She was still convinced that he was the villain in this story, and that he was punishing her for fighting for what she believed in. He could see the cracks forming though. Her posts became less frequent, and when she did post, the likes and comments were way lower than before. People weren't buying into her narrative anymore. Their court date was set, and his sister's confidence finally started to crumble when his lawyer submitted the evidence they'd collected. Screenshots of her social media posts, videos of her protest outside his workplace, and records of her attempts to involve his co-workers and family. It was all laid out in black and white. The judge didn't have to look very hard to see the pattern of harassment. In the days leading up to the court appearance, his sister tried to play damage control. She started deleting posts, pretending like she hadn't spent months smearing his name online. The problem for her was that he already had everything backed up. Every single post, comment, and video was saved. He wasn't taking any chances. At the final conciliation meeting before the court date, his sister completely broke down. She showed up looking nothing like her usual confident self. Her shoulders were hunched, her face was pale, and she avoided eye contact with everyone in the room. When the lawyer laid out the case against her, she burst into tears. She begged him to drop the lawsuit, saying she didn't mean for things to get this far and that she just wanted to support his ex. "I didn't know she was lying," she cried. "I thought I was doing the right thing." He stared at her for a moment, trying to decide if he believed her. Part of him wanted to think she was genuinely remorseful, but another part of him couldn't forget how far she'd gone. She hadn't just taken his ex's side, she'd actively tried to ruin his life. She'd harassed him, spread lies, and even risked his job. He wasn't about to let her off the hook just because she was suddenly sorry. "You had plenty of chances to stop," he told her. "I warned you. Dad warned you. Even Mom tried to talk some sense into you, but you kept pushing. This is on you." She sobbed harder, but he didn't budge. The meeting ended with her agreeing to a settlement. She'd have to pay him a significant amount in damages, plus all the legal fees he'd incurred. His lawyer made sure the agreement was airtight. There was no way for her to wriggle out of it. After the settlement, his sister's life took a serious hit. She didn't have the money to pay him outright, so his mom ended up helping her cover the costs. His dad wasn't happy about it, but his mom insisted, saying she couldn't stand to see her daughter suffer. The catch was that his sister would have to pay his mom back over time. Knowing his sister, that's probably going to be a long and painful process for both of them. The financial burden wasn't the only consequence his sister faced. Her social media presence, which she'd once used to rally people against him, became a ghost town. She deleted all her posts about the situation, but the damage to her reputation was already done. A lot of her friends distanced themselves from her, especially after finding out the truth about his ex's lies. Even some of their relatives who'd initially taken her side turned their backs on her. She went from being the self-righteous warrior to the outcast who'd gone too far. His ex, on the other hand, disappeared completely. He hasn't heard a word from her since the settlement, and honestly he prefers it that way. She caused enough chaos in his life, and he's just glad she's gone. The situation with his sister put a permanent strain on their family. His dad hasn't spoken to her much since everything went down. He's still angry about how she sided with his ex and tried to destroy him. His brother barely acknowledges her existence, which is saying something because he's usually the peacekeeper in the family. As for his mom, she's stuck in the middle, trying to keep the family together, even though it's clear things will never be the same. He's had to set some firm boundaries with his sister. She's tried to reach out a couple of times, but he's not interested in rebuilding that relationship right now. Maybe someday, if she truly changes, he'll consider it. But for now, he's focusing on the people who actually support him. Looking back, it's wild to think about how this all started. His ex showed up out of nowhere, claiming her son was his, and somehow it spiraled into months of chaos. If he hadn't insisted on that DNA test, who knows where he'd be right now? Probably paying child support for a kid that isn't even his. This whole ordeal taught him a lot about people. It showed him how far some will go to manipulate others, and how easily others can be swept up in lies. It also reminded him of the importance of standing his ground, even when the odds feel stacked against him. He won't pretend he handled everything perfectly. Maybe he shouldn't have joked about the situation with his brother. Maybe he could have tried harder to de-escalate things with his sister. But at the end of the day, he did what he had to do to protect himself, and he doesn't regret it. Now that everything is settled, he's trying to move on. He's been focusing on his work and rebuilding his reputation there. His boss has been understanding, but he knows it'll take time for people to stop associating him with the drama. He's also reconnecting with friends and family members who stood by him through all this. Those relationships mean more to him now than ever. As for his sister, she's got a long road ahead of her. She'll be paying off her debt to his mom for years, and she'll have to figure out how to rebuild her own life. Maybe this will be a wake-up call for her, or maybe she'll double down on her bitterness. Either way, it's not his problem anymore. For the first time in months, he feels like he can breathe again. The storm has passed, and while there's still some cleanup to do, he's finally free to move forward.